I'm Jay Elias, General Counsel at Dyer Lake Funeral Home in North Attleboro. Welcome to this episode of Live and Learn, a series of programs designed to be informative, educational, and upbeat, and always intended to enhance and encourage our personal wellness and awareness. There are scores of definitions of the word best. It's said to mean excelling all others, as in the best student in the class, or the most productive of good and offering the greatest advantage or satisfaction, as in what's the best thing to do. It's used to convey the highest quality or being the most suitable, pleasing, or effective type of thing or person. This is the best meal I've ever had. The best. In early civilizations and cultures, a bride-to-be was required to receive her family's permission to marry. If that didn't happen, the bride was often forcibly removed from her home by the groom and his troop of bride knights in a practice known as marriage by capture. So, during a large portion of the history of groomsmen, these men served as the groom's army, fighting the bride's relatives so that the groom could abscond with the bride if need be. In other cases, the bride was actually kidnapped by the groom and the bride knights. So it seems that our custom of having a single best man to be there for the groom is a throwback to what could be thought of as a two-man, strong-armed tactic. After all, it wasn't just to help direct guests where to sit during the ceremony or hold the wedding band or make a sentimental or tongue-in-cheek toast at the reception. The best man, as it was selected because the groom trusted him for some very important tasks that may lay ahead. The role of the best man continued to evolve over the years. There remained a real threat that the bride's family would attempt to obtain her return forcibly, so the best man remained at the groom's side throughout the marriage ceremony. Alert and well-armed, he continued his duties after the ceremony by standing guard as sentry outside the newlywed's home. There's evidence found in a number of historic German churches that beneath their altars lay an arsenal of clubs, knives, and spears, indications that these were there to protect the groom from possible attack by the bride's family in an attempt to recapture her. And in those very early days, a bride's family would often present the groom with a large dowry of money and household goods. The abundance of riches made the soon-to-be married couple a target for robbers, ex-lovers, and bad spirits. The groomsmen would dress like the groom to confuse those evildoers, as would the bridesmaids on behalf of the bride. And they'd be at the ready to fight anyone who crossed the newlyweds. In some cultures, the groomsmen might have walked with the bride to the ceremony as her personal protectors. It seems that the term best man came not from being the groom's best friend, but because he was quite simply the best swordsman. Changing gears, literally, what do you think some of the best-selling vehicles were in 2021? The Honda Accord, the Toyota Corolla, or Camry? The answer? The top 3 best-selling vehicles in the United States in 2021 weren't even cars. They were trucks. From third place to first, the Chevy Silverado, the Dodge Ram, and the Ford F-Series trucks. The fact is that in 2020, for the first year ever, Americans bought more pickup trucks than passenger cars. And that trend continued in 2021 and still continues in 2022. By the way, speaking of cars, the best-selling Ford Model T was first introduced to the world in 1908. Henry Ford wanted the Model T to be affordable, simple to operate, and durable. It was one of the first mass production vehicles, allowing Ford to achieve his aim of manufacturing what he called the universal car. The car was manufactured on the Ford Motor Company's revolutionary moving assembly line, and thanks to the mass production of the vehicle, Ford could sell the car for anywhere between $260 and $850. By the early 1920s, more than 1/2 of all registered automobiles in the world were Fords, and all in all, more than 15 million Model Ts were built and sold. Here's something Henry Ford would never have predicted, though. In 2021, as the automotive industry moved away from sedans and toward electric vehicles, Ford refocused its sales and production on trucks, SUVs, and commercial vehicles. And so since that time, Ford has only been making one car, the electric Ford Mustang. Speaking of cars, what do you think the color is for the best color of car? Well, that depends on the reason. Is it the best selling color, or the color that reflects the best resale value, or maybe the best color from a safety perspective? According to Kelley Blue Book, like many vehicle features, the color of a car plays a role in determining its resale value. Today's popular car colors will probably make a vehicle more popular to a buyer 5 years from now, but not so much after that. And it seems that choosing the wrong color in some cases can even cause a car to depreciate more rapidly than others. White is the best-selling car color in the country, with the exception of convertibles and sports cars of all things. For them, the best-selling color is not white, it's black. And you could probably guess that some colors may make a car safer than others. There have been a number of studies looking at the relationship between the color of a vehicle and its crash risk. And almost always the color white, once again, shows up at the top of the list as the safest color. Most reports indicate that in a white vehicle you would have a 12% less chance of accident involvement than in a black vehicle in all types of weather and lighting. The next best, safest color, that would be yellow. Both white and yellow cars are simply more visible than any other car color, and that equates to being easier for other drivers to spot and less likely to be hit. Hey, have you read any good books lately? And what do you think is the best-selling book of all time? If you think about it, it should be no surprise that the best-selling book of all time is the Christian Bible. It's almost impossible to know just how many copies have actually been printed, but some researchers suggest the total number is probably between 5 and 7 billion copies. Johann Gutenberg's 42-line Bible is probably the most famous Bible in the world, and it's considered to be the earliest full-scale work printed using movable type. Printing with movable type had been developed hundreds of years earlier in East Asia, including China and Korea, using a method known as block printing, which used panels of hand-carved wood blocks in reverse. But it was Gutenberg's invention that allowed the mass production of books for the first time, and that truly changed the world. Key to Gutenberg's design was replacing those wood blocks with metal ones, and also printing each block with letters. He also made his own ink to adhere to metal rather than wood, and he perfected a method for flattening printing paper by using a wine press, traditionally used to press grapes for wine and olives for oil. Before Gutenberg, almost every book outside of those printed with wood blocks in Asia had to be copied by hand. With the invention of his printing press, it was possible to speed up the process without sacrificing quality. It was in 1452 in Mainz, Germany, that Gutenberg first produced the one book to come out of his shop, a Bible. It's been estimated that he printed 180 copies of the 1,300-page Gutenberg Bible, sometimes referred to as the 42-line Bible, because each page contained 42 lines of texts in Gothic type with double columns and featuring some letters in color. To offer a bit of perspective as to the importance of Gutenberg's work, in the 50 years that followed that first printing of 180 copies of the Bible, it's said that European printers were able to produce 15 million books, the majority of which were Bibles. And by 1815, the total number of Bibles printed numbered 1.3 billion, and it's been estimated that about 2.5 billion Bibles were printed between then and 1975. In the 21st century alone, there are approximately 80 million Bibles being printed every year. The best-selling book. As for non-religious books, Although it's difficult to find a true consensus as to the best-selling books of all times, it's often reported that these are some of the top sellers. Don Quixote, a Spanish epic novel by Miguel de Cervantes, originally published in two parts in 1605 and 1615, said to have sold more than 500 million books over the past 400 years. Rivaling, if not exceeding, Don Quixote are the fantasy novels which make up the Harry Potter series written by British author J.K. Rowling. Think about it. The Harry Potter novels have only been around for less than 30 years, while Don Quixote amassed its millions of sales over the course of hundreds of years. The first novel in the series, originally titled Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone when it was published in the United Kingdom in 1997, was later renamed Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone when it became available in the U.S. Initially, just 500 copies of that first Harry Potter book were published in hardcover, and of those, only 200 were sold, while 300 copies found their way to libraries, and Rowling received a whopping $4,000 advance. But within 2 years, the book sold more than 300,000 copies in the United Kingdom before being released in the United States in October 1998. And by December of that year, the book hit the New York Times bestseller list for the first time, staying there for a remarkable 82 consecutive weeks. The author has described her life in the years before the book's publication as being, quote, as poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless. The Harry Potter movies themselves have been estimated to have grossed over $9 billion worldwide, and their author is reportedly the highest paid woman and author in the world, with a reported net worth greater than $1 billion. And this book is said to have sold more than 200 million copies since it was first published in 1859. This bestseller, it's A Tale of Two Cities, written by Charles Dickens. Even if you've never read it, you may be familiar with its most famous opening passage. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. And then there's Theodore Geisel, best known as Dr. Seuss. There have been some 700 million copies of his books sold throughout the world, undoubtedly making him one of the most enduringly popular and best-selling children's book authors of all time. We're all familiar with The Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, but he's actually written more than 60 books. Geisel's first Dr. Seuss book was called And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, and it was first published in 1937. In 2021, though, Mulberry Street was one of 6 of his books that the author's estate chose to stop publishing and stop selling after Dr. Seuss Enterprises said it consulted a panel of experts, including educators, to review its catalog of Seuss books, and they concluded that the racial and ethnic stereotypes in those 6 books were hurtful and wrong. The best-selling song? Well, with 50 million copies sold, not only is Bing Crosby's White Christmas the best-selling Christmas song of all times, it's also the best-selling single ever. It first aired during the Kraft Music Hall radio show on December 25, 1941. Only a few weeks earlier, on December 7, our nation experienced the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. By late December 1941, Americans were enlisting in the military in record numbers as our country mobilized for war, and soldiers and their families heard, "I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas," a melancholy and wistful reminder of good days that had just passed. The song itself had something of a sad backstory as well. It was written by Irving Berlin, the prolific composer of hundreds of songs, including God Bless America, often thought of as one of the country's best-loved unofficial anthems. Berlin once said that God Bless America wasn't written as a patriotic song, but as an expression of his own deep personal gratitude for what the country had done for its citizens and for merely allowing him, a Jewish Russian-born immigrant raised in poverty, to become a successful songwriter. And Berlin's own 3-week-old son had died on Christmas Day in 1928. So every year on that day, he and his wife visited the baby's grave, giving yet another layer of depth and meaning to the best-selling White Christmas. The best-selling musical artist? Well, that would be the Beatles. They continue to be the best-selling recording artists with more than 183 million album sales certified in the US alone. Individually, the second best-selling recording artist is Elvis Presley. And Presley's homestead of Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, where he's buried, is the second most visited private home in America, with over 600,000 visitors a year and more than 20 million visitors having visited there. The single most visited home in the country? That would be the White House in Washington, D.C., although these days touring the White House requires some advanced planning. Public tour requests have to be made through your member of Congress and submitted up to 3 months in advance. By the way, question for you. Do you remember the names of those top 3 best-selling vehicles in 2021? Do you remember what year Johann Gutenberg published his Bible, or even how many lines were on each page of that Gutenberg Bible? Well, one of the best methods for memorizing individual pieces of information is called chunking. It's a memory technique that helps by combining individual pieces of information into more meaningful groups, making it more likely that you'll remember it. For example, here are some random numbers. Try and remember them. 32724680075. 32724680075. That's 10 individual numbers. 10 things to remember. Remember what they are? Well, if you group the numbers into 3 chunks, then there are only 3 groups you have to remember, not 10. It's one of the best memory techniques. That's what memory chunking is all about. Think about those same 10 numbers, but this time chunked into 3 segments, as if they were, let's say, a telephone number. So instead of 32724680075, it would be 32724680075. Not only are there less groups of numbers to remember, you're able to say and remember them with a rhythm and a beat. It's like remembering a Social Security number as well. 000123456. That's chunking, one of the best ways to remember numbers or even names. We've all heard the expression that laughter is the best medicine. Is there any truth to it, though? Although they are sometimes used interchangeably, laughter and humor have very different meanings. Humor refers to the stimulus, like a joke, which evokes a response, hopefully. Laughter might be that response. It's a physical reaction that's characterized by a sound, laughter, certain facial expressions, and the contraction of some of our muscle groups. But let's take a deeper look at laughter for a moment. It's long been recognized that laughter can produce psychological benefits like improving depression, anxiety, stress, our mood. There have been studies that have linked laughter and humor with increased levels of pain tolerance as well. And there have been studies that have shown the beneficial blood pressure and cardiopulmonary effects of laughter, all suggesting that our bodies may respond physiologically to a bout of laughter as it does to a bout of exercise. There are also studies that have used humor therapy as a medication of sorts to treat agitation in patients with dementia. It seems that we may also laugh to make and maintain social bonds. Laughter, it seems, can be a very efficient way of smoothing over a social interaction with somebody. It can signify our agreement with others, our understanding of them on some level, and our recognition of a common bond of sorts. If you consider that laughter has been shown to have both psychological and physiological benefits, generally doesn't cost anything, and has no known adverse side effects, you might say that laughter could just be the best medicine. Speaking of sounds and medicine, when you hear the word hiccup, you may think about a typically short-lived, if a little embarrassing and inconvenient body function, almost always associated with good times, whether overindulging in food or drink. We've all experienced hiccups at some point in our life. The medical term for hiccups, by the way, is singultus, from the Latin singult, which means to catch one's breath while sobbing. You've probably heard of a dozen or more remedies for hiccups as well. Most everyone has a foolproof remedy they've told you about. Drink from the wrong side of a glass. Breathe into a paper bag. Sip ice cold water. Bite on a lemon or have a sip of vinegar. Take a scoop of peanut butter. Then there's hold your breath for a short time and exhale sharply. And one of the old standbys, have someone jump out and shout boo to frighten you. So what is the best remedy for hiccups? Is there even an effective remedy for them? Let's take a little step back here. Hiccups are the result of a sudden and involuntary contraction of the diaphragm and the muscles within our rib cage. An abrupt closure of something called the glottis, that's a part of the larynx consisting of the vocal cords and the opening between them, follows those involuntary contractions and produces the characteristic hic sound. And they can occur in adults, children, infants, even in the uterus, and apparently serve no physiological purpose. Several factors do seem to trigger short bouts of hiccups, though, including a stomach full of too much food or alcohol or air, sudden changes in temperature, or excitement, stress, and other heightened emotions can trigger hiccups. One report from Italy indicated that 2 men there were able to provoke hiccups by stroking or shaving their beards. And in yet another instance, the source of the hiccup, a hair tickling the eardrum. Go online or into the drugstore these days and you can find something called Hickaway. It apparently works with water to instantly relieve hiccups by forcibly sipping from the square head of the Hickaway straw for 3 seconds while inhaling to help stop fast and slow hiccups. Wow. And there's Hiccup-Pops, marketed as being specially formulated, shockingly tasty lollipops, proven to stop occasional hiccups in seconds. And although even a few minutes or even hours of hiccups can be distressing, consider poor Charles Osborne of Anthon, Iowa. Born in 1894, he passed away in 1991. It seems he began hiccuping in 1922 while trying to weigh a hog. And unable to find a cure, he continued to hiccup for 68 years until February 1990. During the first few decades, he hiccuped up to 40 times a minute. And after several years, the hiccups slowed to 20 a minute. Can you imagine? That being said, if the hiccups really do persist, it may indicate an underlying medical problem. And so after all that, the best remedy for hiccups? Sorry to say, there isn't one that's been proven to be effective. I'm Jay Elias. Thank you for watching this episode of Live and Learn. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to your joining me again for another program designed to enhance and encourage your personal wellness and awareness. Until then, remember, it's never too late to learn. And consider this, the best way to predict your future is to create it.